I have recently converted this delivery van into a tiny home on wheels, and in this video I'm going to show you the full build from start to finish. This is a 2017 Ford Transit 2.2 litre diesel. It's the long wheelbase extra high roof, so there's plenty of space to move around inside. Right, let's get to work. The first job on the agenda was to strip out all the old plywood. Remove the bulkhead and clean out the van. I didn't throw away any of the plywood as I plan to use it as a template when I replace the panelling. Once the inside was clean, I touched it up with some paint and filled in some holes. The first real big job on the van was building a fully insulated subfloor. I started by building a frame out of wood to hold the insulation, which I then glued down. For the insulation I used Celotex, which I cut to fit perfectly inside the frame. I'm going to be honest with you, that stuff is horrible. So as you can see, I am covered in dust. One thing I would say if you are going to do this is make sure that you wear a mask. Then I used aluminium tape to create a vapor barrier to prevent any moisture from soaking through the insulation to the metal floor below. This stuff here sticks to itself really well and to this. So, I mean, I think it looks pretty good. I then insulated my wheel arches. Carpeted the divider between the living space and the cab. And moved on to build the ply floor for the van. Lifting them makes me realise how unfit I am. Now this is where my previously removed plywood comes in. I used the old floor to draw around onto 12mm sheets of plywood, cut it to shape and carefully placed it on top of the insulated floor. I then screwed the new plywood floor down to the wooden frame I made for the installation. Alright, that's done. And I tell you what, for a one-day job that wasn't bad. The next job involved making the van leak-proof. There are holes in my van. Ford Transits come with holes in the side, and today I'm going to have to fix that, which the external side trims click into. These let water in over time, so I decided to fill the holes with non-setting mastic. Once all the holes were filled, I used sound deadening sheets to take any flex out of the panels, ready for when I start insulating the sides and ceiling. I also installed some conduit to run wires for later on in the build, because planning ahead is everything when it comes to a van conversion. And then it was on to the insulation. I started by installing a thermal liner to the walls of the van, which I could cut with either a knife or a pair of scissors. Once I was happy that I'd covered all the areas I needed to, it was time to add the fleece insulation. I used a 50mm thick recycled plastic, which worked a treat. At this stage I only covered the lower and top parts of the walls, as I have something planned for the middle section. Then it was on to installing a vapor barrier using a damp proof membrane. Once I'd covered the lower and top areas of the wall, leaving the middle section for later, I moved on to framing the walls. Framing is pretty important. It allows you to fix your thinner plywood lining and cabinets to the thicker wooden frame. I used 12mm ply for the framework. Whilst installing the frame, I found a few leaks coming down from the roof, which I needed to seal up before I could move on any further with this van build. See this? Water. I've written leak up there. So that's one good thing about it raining and you're in the van, is you can check to see if there are any leaks. So up onto the roof I went, but figured whilst I was up there, I might as well install my roof rack to hold my solar panel, which I'll install later. I also found some rust on the roof that needed treating and painting before sealing. Once all the holes were fixed, it was time to ply line the walls of the van. I started off by using the ply I removed previously as a template to cut it to shape. Firstly, I mounted the lower sections to the wall before building a frame for my inserts. I'm building inserts to give me extra room for my bed so I can sleep widthways in the van. These inserts will allow me to fit a 6'3" mattress in here comfortably. Once the inserts were made, I mounted the top parts of plywood, leaving the rear doors and side sliding door for later. I then carpeted some of the bare metal areas just to tidy up the look. When you have such a large van, you need to feel confident when driving and parking. So I felt it was important to install a reversing camera now before I find it really difficult in the future once all the units are installed. I removed the rear brake light, installed the new light with the built-in camera, ran the wire to the front of the van through the conduit I laid earlier, down a door pillar, along the roof lining, and attached the monitor to where the rear view mirror would normally be. Wiring it up wasn't easy, but I did make a video about how to do it, which you may want to watch later. Now that the camera was taken care of, it was time to paint the ply inside the van. I also carpeted the inserts, and once I was happy with that, I laid a vinyl floor on my plywood floor to make the floor easier to clean, but mainly because it looked better. I then finished off the inserts with a bit of wood framing and moved on to the next job, which was building my bed frame. I wanted a solid frame, so I built the two end posts out of 3x4 timber, supported them in the middle, and then used the IKEA hack of using their bed slats to make the main support for the bed. I used 3 of them in the end and screwed them into place using the brackets supplied by IKEA. They're pretty strong. I love it when a plan comes together. I then made some width slats to support the mattress, a quick test with a temporary mattress, and the bed frame was done. It's not too high up either. Look, I've still got all this space, and obviously the ceiling's gonna be right there. It is all finally starting to come together. Now, we don't all like to talk about it, but let's face it, everyone needs to poo. But no one needs to know about it, so I decided to build a hidden toilet compartment in the van. I started off by building a front for the bed frame before building a box for the toilet to live in. Working out the height off the ground was really important. Once I was happy with the shape, I then made a top for the box because this toilet will double up as a seat for when the toilet isn't in use. I then covered the front of the bed frame with 9mm ply and cut an opening for easy access to under the bed. I then built a removable front for the toilet box for easy access when emptying. And then lastly, I screwed down the toilet box. As great as my new seat was, I needed more seating. It was time to build my sofa, which will double up as an extra sleeping area for guests. Again, I built a basic frame, making sure it was the same height off the ground as the toilet box. Made a slatted top with a pull out on one side to make almost a corner sofa type shape, so that if I have guests, and they're taller than 4 foot. They can also sleep widthways in the van.
Yeah, it kind of works.
Next it was time to install some ventilation. I decided to go with the Max Van Deluxe because you know, everyone installs these things. I started by building a template so I could work out where it was going to go on the roof. I even had to cut away some of the roof bars to make space for such a huge fan. Once the bars were cut and painted, I built a wooden frame for the fan to sit in and proceeded to cut this huge hole in the roof, which was pretty daunting. Once the hole was cut, I added mastic sealant to the plastic frame and screwed it down to the wooden frame I made earlier. Once I was happy that I had a good seal all the way around, it was time to pop in the fan itself and then seal around the edges. It looked easy, but it wasn't. Now it was time to start thinking about power, and where better to start than with solar. I ordered a huge solar panel that I could barely lift on my own. This was a 305 watt beast, which I mounted directly onto the roof bars I installed earlier, and it fit really well. It was a little difficult, but that's because I did it on my own. Always ask for help if you need it. Next I drilled a hole in the roof and mounted the housing for the wires to run through. Ran the wires down behind the ply lining and out below the bed frame, ready to mount my solar charge controller and cut off switch. Then all I had to do is connect them up and the solar is all set to charge my leisure battery, which I will install later. Next it was time to install my DC to DC charger, my fuse boxes and my bus bars. I mounted everything to a wooden panel and marked the wire sizes with masking tape for reference. I started off with a schematic and planned out where I would locate everything. I cut holes in the wood panel I made to keep my wiring nice and tidy behind, and then all there was to do was wire it all up. Now I'm no electrician, so being able to follow a detailed schematic came in very useful as it maps out everything you need from wire sizes to the connectors. I ran a wire from the DC to DC charger at the back of the van all the way to the front of the van under the driver's seat, which is where the van's engine battery sits. I installed a battery cut-off switch and connected all the wires. Then all there was to do was remove the reference tape. Whilst I waited for my leisure battery to arrive, it was time to install my kitchen. I went the easy route and ordered a flat pack kitchen from IKEA. Building the units was pretty easy. These kitchens are designed for houses, not vans, so there were a few alterations that I had to make to get the units to fit snugly into the space. Once the units were all in place, it was time to install the countertop. I went for a laminate countertop, which I would not recommend. I later replaced this with a solid beechwood worktop, which is lighter and easy to work with. I measured and cut the countertop to size, and then cut the hole for the sink and the tap. That was also from IKEA. Fitting the tap and sink was pretty straightforward, with the tools provided by IKEA. Lastly, I assembled the drawers and mounted the doors, and installed 2 water tanks, one for fresh water and one for grey water, and the kitchen was ready. Don't worry, I will keep you informed on the miles per gallon I get from this van now that I've got this heavy kitchen in here. Next I installed my leisure battery. I went for a 200 amp hour lithium battery. I built a wooden platform for the battery to sit in and installed a strap to stop the battery from moving around. Then I wired up the battery and tested some of my lights I installed previously. I now had power in the van.
Look at that.
As my homemade units, like the bed and the sofa and the seat, were starting to look a little out of place next to my nice clean new IKEA kitchen, I decided to give them a lick of paint to tidy them up. I then installed my fridge. I went for a Dometic because I've heard really good things about them and about how quiet they are and how reliable. The plan for the fridge is to locate it under the sofa, so I wired up a plug, slotted in the fridge, which fit perfectly because I planned the sofa dimensions based on this exact fridge earlier, because again, planning is everything. I then installed a door for the fridge unit / sofa. I then fitted a memory foam mattress, which was cut to order so it would fit perfectly to my bed shape. Next, I installed a removable table for eating. I went for the lagun table leg and made the tabletop myself out of pine wood so it would fit perfectly in the space with room to move. I then stained the tabletop with American walnut stain. It was now time to install my privacy curtain, which I went for a simple pole and ring curtain setup. It works a treat as the curtains are blackout and thermal. It was now time to do the job I've been putting off for ages, which was the ceiling. I wanted a ceiling that would stand out, so I got my dad to help me with the install. We started off by planning out where the wooden slats would go before fitting the black painted plywood. We cut the hole for the max fan and then fitted the wooden slats for the plywood. Sounds simple, but it wasn't. The hardest part was getting the slats as straight as possible. If you're planning a van conversion, I would highly recommend fitting the ceiling before you start building any of your furniture, as working around your already installed furniture makes this job a hell of a lot harder. We then screwed the slats to the plywood, covered up the screws with pellets, cut the hole for the max air fan, and then stained the slats with the American walnut stain I used for the tabletop. We also fitted some spotlights. There is absolutely no way I would have been able to do this job without the help of my dad.
It's worth it though, wasn't it? Beautiful.
Next, it was time to build my overhead cabinets. I started off by building 3 frames and scribed them to the ceiling. I then screwed them to the ceiling and built the box frame in whilst it was suspended in place. This was not at all easy, as I really struggled to get the units level, but once they were in place and all screwed together, I could then move on to ply lining the base of the units.
I've done an okay job considering my experience, but it could have looked a lot better.
The next job was to build a faceplate for above the cab area. I started off by making some cardboard templates that I would use to cut the wood from. I built them in 3 pieces so they were easy to install, and then carpeted them with the same veil trim I'd used for the bed inserts earlier. I then screwed them into place and moved on to painting my overhead cabinets. I also fitted a light switch to the underside of the cabinets for the spotlights on the ceiling. And that was it. 40 days of hard work and sleepless nights, and I now have a fully functioning camper van for all my adventures.
So in total, this van conversion cost me £22,000. I paid £11,000 for the van, I had to pay £5,000 for a new engine, and the conversion, all in all, cost me £6,000. And if I compare that to what I could have bought for the same amount of money, I would have either got a van that was too small for what I'm going to use it for, or one that doesn't suit my needs. I've just got to get out there and start using it now. If you'd like a more detailed explanation of any of the jobs that I did in this video, check out this playlist here where you can watch the build from the very start right to the end, where I show how I built each section of the van. And other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!